Good snowy Wednesday evening, everyone. I'm Burke Weather meteorologist Scotty Powell reporting from Oklahoma City tonight here at the National Tornado and Severe Weather Conference. And we are happy to have you guys joining us tonight. I know a lot of activity going on in the Carolinas and Virginia and Georgia and Tennessee. A lot of snow falling in a lot of places, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that tonight as well. Looking forward to our discussion tonight. We have three great guests on social media and the social science behind that. I know we had a little bit of discussion back in November with Brad Panovich and Grant Gilmore, so we're going to kind of get into that a little bit more tonight with our guest. We have Dr. Laura Myers here with us, who is the expert on social science and social media. She's joining us from Alabama. We have Miss Jennifer Watson as well. Mr. Tim Bellissi, who is in Asheville, North Carolina tonight. He's actually out checking the snow right now, so he'll join us in just a second. And again, I'm Scotty here reporting from Oklahoma City. Myself and Joey are out here for a conference, and I'll let Joey talk a little bit, and then we'll toss it to Ricky and get started.
You guys will have to excuse me and Scotty this evening as we have to make sure we mute each other. We're actually sitting side by side here in the hotel, the best spot we can find Wi-Fi to make sure that we run this thing. But yeah, we're out here at the National Tornado Summit, having a good time. Got to see some cool stuff, learned some new information, did a lot of networking with a lot of people. Got a lot of good upcoming shows out of this conference. So that's definitely a plus. But yeah, I guess all the excitement that was happening back home as usual. We get out of there, and then all the fun happens there. We get Jim Cantori to come to our neighborhood whenever we leave. So, but anyway, I'll give it back to Scotty. We'll get this show started. He can bring on Ricky to start doing some questions, and let's roll with it.
I would like to add before we start tonight. Here in warm and balmy Oklahoma City, it was a nice 61 degrees this afternoon. So I know you guys in the Carolinas are enjoying the 30s and the snow, but out here it was sunny and 61. So enjoyed our time out here and learned a lot of good stuff. So maybe as we talk a little bit about social science tonight, we can kind of discuss a little bit about what was talked out here, especially with thunderstorms and lightning and the new severe weather categories from the SPC. So. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Ricky, and we can start the conversation.
All right, sounds good. And you'll have to excuse me. I'm kind of jumping back and forth doing so many different things, answering probably about 150 questions so far today in our school weather account at UNCC Weather, with the majority of them being, are we going to have class tomorrow? So it's a fun day and a busy day around here. So yeah.
Well, are you going to have class tomorrow?
We have canceled class through noon tomorrow, which will likely be extended if we get 11 inches of snow, as is quite possible in some areas. But we'll see. We're actually working with the police department to get better forecast to them, so hopefully something comes out of that. But yeah, it's kind of a nice night to bring everyone on with the snow, because Dr. Myers, I know you've done a lot of social science work in terms of severe weather and winter weather, and then Tim, you're dealing with the snow as well, and then Jennifer, you've got, is the snow in the Atlanta metro area, or is it just north still?
Just north. We actually had some really beautiful big flakes and a little bit of light snow for maybe an hour or so on and off, mixed with sleet, and then now we're just stuck in a cold rain, so it's kind of miserable outside right now.
33-degree rain. We're dealing with 33-degree snow right now, but I had to field the question of why is it snowing when it's 36 degrees earlier, but lots of heavy snow coming our way. So, Dr. Myers, I know you primarily have worked with severe weather research, but haven't you done some stuff with the winter weather as well?
I have. We did some research on the January 28th, 2014 events in Birmingham and Atlanta last year.
Okay. So I remember James Spann having his whole incident where the forecast was a little bit wrong. Tell us a little bit about that event, and then maybe some of the major findings you got from that.
Well, both events, the Birmingham versus the Atlanta, were very different events. In Birmingham, as James mentioned, it was a missed forecast. And over in Atlanta, the issue was that the forecast changed overnight. And so it was more of a decision-making issue in Atlanta, whereas it was more of, the missed forecast in Birmingham. So, looking at it in terms of what the public knew and how the public reacted was very interesting in both locations. The Atlanta event was very interesting in the sense that one of the major findings was about how the process went overnight, as it went from a watch to an advisory to a warning. Because what we found is that many people thought the advisory was actually a reduction in the severity as opposed to an increase. And so a lot of people let down their guard. They went to bed that night thinking that it was not going to be that bad. When it went to advisory, people who heard that it went to advisory thought it was even less severe. And so by the time they got to the next morning, pretty much everybody was going to go on about their business.
And since then, I mean, there's been lots of talks at the AMS conference, NWA conference, about how we can better communicate these risks. I mean, what were some of the major findings or maybe suggestions that were put out by your research?
Well, over in Atlanta, the National Weather Service office has really reevaluated the use of the advisory in the winter process, and also trying to understand better when to get that information out, especially if it's an overnight event. Because the situation changed overnight, the forecast changed overnight. They're working at getting all the partners to understand that there's that potential for that to happen, and so they're setting up all kinds of ways to make sure that information gets out appropriately in overnight situations. And the biggest thing is, the issue of educating the public and partners about what the advisory actually means. Another factor was that the city was just not as prepared for the event. And so when it comes down to, what could have been done and what could have been done better, all the partners had to be involved in that process because for a population that large in a situation like that, they need to be more prepared.
And Jennifer, from a media standpoint, since you're in the Atlanta area, has there been talks between different TV stations or different, media entities about how they'll communicate these things based off of some of the findings?
Well, not necessarily like within the different television stations and everything, but what we've seen is the government officials especially have talked to all of us. They've gotten feedback from everyone, from the Weather Channel, local TV stations, and the National Weather Service, and that's actually how they made their forecasts and did their decisions for today. They actually, in the news conference, if you weren't able to watch it, they wanted everyone to basically get their kids between noon and 2 p.m. and then literally they told businesses to start letting their employees go between 2 p.m. and 4 p.m. So they are trying to implement everything, and they didn't want chaos on the roads. And I think for the most part everyone did a pretty good job with everything, which was really good. But then once it started snowing a little bit and it wasn't crazy, I think everybody got in panic mode and they're like, what, we thought it was going to be okay to wait a little longer, but then they all hit, the roads at once. So we kind of had a mini rush hour around 1:30, 2 o'clock this afternoon. But for the most part, I think the local TV stations, us, and the National Weather Service, we're all understanding, the needs for people to really understand the forecast. And for this one, it was changing by the hour. So I think, though, they did a really good job.
And Dr. Myers, in terms of getting people home, has there been any research on the amount of time people need to, get the information, make a decision based off the information, and then get to a safe place?
Yeah, and it has a lot to do with, when an event occurs in the work week. If it happens over a weekend, it's a whole different story. If it happens overnight, you can make decisions to be closed before the workday starts. But for these events that occur during the day, the question is, do you go on and make your closing decisions and knock out the whole day, or do you do like what Jennifer's talking about and make that decision during the day? And it has a lot to do with the type of population you have. In Atlanta, what we learned from that is that most people work at least an hour away from where they live. And so to try to get back under bad conditions, you're going to need a lot of time. So you actually need a staggered process, much like what Jennifer was mentioning. And the problem is at a certain point, people still tend to panic. And so it's a really hard thing to do. And what the tendency is now is to just go on and make those closure decisions. It's kind of an overreaction to try to prevent the types of panics that can occur on the roadways.
Tim, you've been here during this snowstorm. I mean, what's been your take on how a lot of the areas have handled closings? Has there been good communication?
Well, I was just going to jump in about the Atlanta situation. Is that also Atlanta, you got to remember, is also a very unique city in how it handles transportation. It's a very car-focused city. I mean, it's just, I mean, mass transit is just not used, and it's not as great as compared to so many other different cities across the U.S. And so,
oops, I think we may have lost him there. Maybe he's kind of frozen and jumping in and out there, but.
What I think he was trying to say, I'll try and add to it unless he comes back in. It's really interesting. People do travel like an hour or more, like north of the city, and even to get to the other side of the city, it can take like 30 to 40 minutes. So it's a difficult situation, and I think our mayor did a good job because you want to stagger it out because everyone hits the road at the same time, and then just I-75 just doesn't move. Everyone's just stuck. And that's what we did. A lot of businesses, they just let out early because we were worried about the northern counties, especially Kennesaw, Marietta, and everything like that. They had a better chance of accumulating snow and slick conditions. So actually, I'm in a hotel room right now, and a lot of other employees are in this hotel room as well, or not hotel room, but hotel, because just for that reason, they were worried about roads becoming slick and just not being able to get to work. And then for our business, we got to produce a live program, so we need people to come to work. So that's where I am right now. But I think what Tim was saying is just the fact that it's a very large, spread out city. It's not, there are people that live inside the perimeter or 285, but there are a lot of people that live outside of the perimeter as well. It's a whole bunch of small communities all clustered together to make one kind of city. So it's a lot of spread out living, and that's what can make it a little bit more treacherous as well.
And Scotty?
Yeah, Tim, I was going to ask you a question because I know you live in the Asheville area, and this is just something that's come up this week that I've noticed. But that forecast office, GSP, they've kind of grouped in different advisories into one. I know just this recent week with the winter storm watch that was issued a couple of days ago, that was also grouped in with the winter weather advisory for black ice and the little event that we got Monday. Do you find it confusing? I mean, honestly, it kind of confused me once I got that text message. Do you think that kind of confuses the public when they get all these different advisories and warnings? Why not just have one specific one for that time?
I hope my connection stays, but I'm just nodding my head because I agree. I was looking at my app myself, and I was confused what the winter weather advisory, if it pertained to this event or the following event. And so I was kind of getting, so you had to go in, you had to read into the event and make sure that you were talking about, or they were talking about the one that's ongoing or had just passed. So if it was confusing to me as a meteorologist, I'm sure it's confusing to the public as well. But it's not their fault. That's just the nature of how things are right now. And maybe something will have to be done.
I found it confusing because first thing, we're over here in Oklahoma and we're getting this, but I could see as the general public may get onto weather.gov or may get the push notifications through certain apps and stuff. I could see how that could confuse them. Well, is this event for this event, or is it the snowstorm that we're talking about 2 or 3 days out?
And Dr. Myers, going off of what you've said before with the Atlanta storm, what about doing things like that? I noticed the office here in Raleigh didn't issue their winter storm watches, I should say, until after the first event was over. And I don't know if that was just an uncertainty thing and it just happened to be a coincidence. But in terms of how we implement things, is that a good or a bad way to do it, perhaps?
Well, I think it's, pretty complicated. When they decide, with multiple events, when do you start and stop that process? Because we had the same problem this week. I'm down in Birmingham, and we had different things coming through, and they were, at different points, and different meteorologists were doing different things. Our TV Mets were issuing different things, and I go straight to the Weather Service and try to work it from that side. And I think it really comes down to the public and who they trust, what authority they go to, and then that's where the confusion can set in. Where does your TV Met decide to start explaining that and breaking that apart? So like, you mentioned James Spann, he does it one way, some of our other TV Mets do it another way, and they try to clarify that for us. If you just go straight to, the advisories, the outlooks, that sort of thing, it can be very confusing.
And that's a huge thing overall, is just getting the communication right, whether it's in the Weather Service wording, whether it's in the TV standpoint. How has that communication perhaps changed over the past year or two since some of these events? Has there been a change into ways the Weather Service in Birmingham puts out information statements? I realize there's been a lot of civil emergency messages sent across the state of Alabama with the past 2 snowstorms.
Yeah, and that's something that they learned from the January event last year, was the need for those civil emergency announcements because it was so confusing. And I think it was still confusing with the civil emergency announcements. People weren't sure what those really were. And so it's really the TV Mets who've been trying to educate the public about the usage of those and what they mean. And because, those events were transportation disasters. And that's when the civil emergency issue comes in, of trying to keep people off the roads, trying to get them to understand that it's more than just trying to tell them what the weather's going to do. It's also trying to tell them how to take care of themselves and keep them off the roads. So I think that has changed quite a bit, and I think it's not just with winter weather that we've had those kind of confusions. The Moore and El Reno tornadoes actually created some issues about the confusion over different types of warnings, because in the El Reno event we had tornado and flash flooding. And so then, how do you get that information out there? How do you prioritize it? So I think it's all types of events we have to work that with.
And a good transition there into maybe severe weather. You did research as well with the Alabama tornado outbreak specifically. What were some of the major findings, maybe with some of those research studies, and what came out of those?
What we did was the April 27th, 2011 tornadoes, and we evaluated the public's perceptions in both Mississippi and Alabama in terms of what they knew, when they knew it, and what kind of protective actions they would take. And the big issue was that the public was not prepared for the strength of those tornadoes. In Mississippi and Alabama, they typically get, the smaller EF3s, 2s, and these were 4s and 5s. And so a big problem is they really didn't understand the severity. They really didn't know what they were supposed to do. And a big factor in the Alabama tornadoes were the fact that the public was well aware way in advance that those tornadoes were coming, and there were tornadoes the morning of the 27th, and people lost power after those tornadoes, and they thought that was the big one. And so because they didn't have power the rest of the day, they weren't getting more information that the big one was still to come. And so what that did is it really changed the way that we do weather in this region, because now we understand that when the power's out, we're going to have to reach them in other ways. And so we've done a lot of work with, trying to enhance that process. Our TV meteorologists understand they may be being seen over the internet or over a cell phone. It may be audio and not visual. And so they've changed the way that they put that information out there, realizing that, we've got all these circumstances that could occur that would actually reduce the potential of the public to get the message.
And Jennifer, I know you worked with Dr. Myers on this research as well, correct?
Didn't work with Dr. Myers, but I was in Tupelo, Mississippi covering the tornadoes, so she was there talking to a lot of the viewers and everything, and about how they got the warnings and everything like that. And actually some of the facts that she has are really interesting on what actually got people to take cover. It wasn't necessarily just one thing. They wanted to have a second verification before they actually took shelter. And I think, Dr. Myers, you can probably explain more on some of that research that you got or did.
Yeah, the secondary confirmation was a real interesting piece of that, is that people don't want to change their behaviors. They don't want to take action when they hear about it the first time. They want to know, is it really going to hit me? Is it really going to be that bad? And so they look for that secondary source of information. It may be that they hear a tornado siren, but then they turn to the TV meteorologist. For a lot of people, it's not just the TV meteorologist, but it's word of mouth. You know, a family member calls them up and says, you know, this is happening, it's real. We also know that the TV meteorologist can provide that secondary confirmation by showing video of the impact of the tornado. And so a lot of that occurred in that particular event. And so we were able to really pick out the fact that, you know, the seriousness of the TV meteorologist and being able to show the video was providing that secondary confirmation, and it got people to take action quicker. So now what we do is we try to educate the public on the need to have multiple ways of getting the information. If they get it over their cell phone, then they need to go turn the TV on. If they hear the siren, then they need to go check another source so that they can get that confirmation.
And what was interesting to add to that, Dr. Myers, was the fact that that was like the first time that I realized how significant social media was, because a lot of people did lose power early in the morning. And actually in Starkville, Mississippi, they lost power, and it wasn't even due to a severe thunderstorm or a tornado. And so people were tweeting me, and they're like, you know, where's the storm? You know, when is it going to be here? And et cetera. And I had so many people like tweet back at me later on that day that, you know, I helped save their lives and I helped give them information that they needed. So it's so interesting how, like, it's so critical to post warnings and updates on every kind of social media platform you have, and even having a live blog as well so people can track it on their computer, I think is really important.
Yeah, one of the things that we've seen in the research is in every severe event that we've looked at, be it you know, tornadoes, be it winter weather, it's been interesting that there's been more and more use of social media. And so understanding exactly what Jennifer's talking about is, how do you push that information out through social media? What kinds of information do you put out? Because the public's using it more. We found that the public is using it for their weather warning process, and we know that that's getting to people first in a lot of cases. You know, it used to be everybody watched television, and so now there's a whole generation of people that social media is their primary source of information. And so you have to know how Twitter works in this process, how Facebook works in this process, because, you know, each of them have different timing issues, and they're different in terms of the kind of information that you can put out. So there's been a lot of work done to figure out how to do that really well, and we're learning that by studying people like Jennifer who are doing it and looking at what works and what the public says works well. And the public's also providing information back to the meteorologists and the TV mets about what's actually happening. They're providing situational awareness and ground truth, and that actually helps with the confirmation, because then the public is telling people this is where it's at and this is how bad it is. So it's really been an enhanced process.
Do you mind if I jump in real quick?
No, go right in.
Yeah, I just want to jump in on the idea that as meteorologists, as we gain more knowledge on the social science and how to work with the social sciences, there's also, we're learning more and more about how we use Twitter and how we use Facebook. But the problem with that is that those two companies, Twitter and Facebook, and whoever else comes along, is that they're all going to always evolve, and they're evolving, you know, to monetize their product. So that's difficult on our end, because yes, we're learning how to use it and really transmit information, or even capture information. But at the same time, those companies are growing, so then we have to evolve with how they're evolving. So it's a sort of this catch-22 that we always sometimes have to play catch-up with these evolving companies.
And with that said, Tim, do you mind if I jump in quick?
You do, please, anytime.
With that said, Tim's exactly right, because we realize now when you post like a tornado warning on Facebook, with the Facebook algorithm and everything, you just never know when it's going to go through their timeline anymore. So we can post, there could be a chance of severe weather maybe the day before, but we're not going to actually post live warnings, on Facebook. We'll, direct people toward Twitter or a different social media platform for that, just because unfortunately there's so many algorithms, you never know when they will see that information. So it's kind of interesting how you do it. So
I want to play off of that, especially for our area, Western North Carolina. Tim, living here, it's much more, I would say 70-30 Facebook to Twitter. How can you get those people to convert over to Twitter? I mean, it's just like it's a task for them to want to go to Twitter, but that's the way that you're going to receive the most up-to-date weather information is via Twitter, because Facebook, you may post something, they may see it 18 hours after a storm's already rolled through.
I don't have a good answer for that. It's somehow Facebook has really maybe I don't know if it really necessarily hit the scene before Twitter. They kind of hit the scene at the same time, for the most part in terms of popularization. But I mean, yeah, it's sort of the folks of Western North Carolina. They're really in tune because they see their local TV meteorologist and they gravitate towards that person, which is fine, which is great. But then, and for whatever reason, that's how they get their information. They hone in on Facebook, and that's it. And they really have a hard time disconnecting and kind of, I don't know, just seeing what else is out there in the world of social media. And Twitter, like you said, is timely, more time accurate information as opposed to Facebook. So I don't know. It's not easy to get these people to get the public to grab. I don't know if you want to say graduate to Twitter or so. I don't know. It's just it's a difficult, problem to solve. Facebook, it'd be great if Facebook somehow gave that ability to just have that straight up time, what am I trying to say? The,
Chronological.
Chronological. Thank you. I know you can do that, but not that many people know that you can do that. You can actually click a toggle button and get your news feed to come in chronological order. So, there's a lot of educating the public as well.
I have a question, Dr. Myers. You might be able to answer this. I've not seen it. Maybe you encountered a little bit of it in some of your studies. But what do so I wish knock something over here. But have you run into people who maybe don't take something they see on Facebook or Twitter as serious as they would, say, the scrolling thing on the bottom of their screen or something from the actual TV screen?
Well, I think what it goes down to is the source of the information, not really where it's coming from. If the TV meteorologist is using Facebook and Twitter and they're following that person, then that's where the credibility comes from. Now, the problem, of course, is, if they're following a lot of other people on Twitter and they're seeing a lot of misinformation or things that, don't make any sense to them, then they actually blame that on Twitter. So what I've seen is that the TV meteorologist and a lot of the official sources work really hard to, really make their presence on Twitter and Facebook and other social media outlets like that. And it's really the connection between their public and those authorities. And so that's seen as more credible. But there are some issues out there. I mean, there's a lot of distortions, and you can hear, the TV meteorologists talk about the distortions that are on Twitter and Facebook and the things that they encounter like that. But then they educate the public about that. I've seen TV meteorologists, bring up something that's been put out on Twitter or Facebook, and they'll explain it and they'll educate the public about why it's wrong or where it's coming from. What do they call them? The social meteorologists? The people that are on social media that are doing meteorology, and the TV Mets are really concerned about that. So there's a lot of work being done out there to help educate the public.
Well, another question: in any of your studies, did you run into anybody who did receive warnings from someone maybe not on the media like that, and maybe run into a problem, or maybe it was a success story?
Not really a success story. In every case where we've run into that, it was somebody who had missed it. and they were upset about it, and we haven't found a case where it caused any harm, but it caused them to question, where the information was coming from, and so then they're always challenging the TV meteorologists about, well, who is this person, and why are they so far off, and then they question the TV meteorologist about, well, how is this information even being done, and so it comes up quite a bit, but fortunately we haven't heard of any horror stories from it.
I think to add to that on a different spin, I think social media is a great way for meteorologists to gain their viewers' trust, because you can actually communicate to them, and it's just an easier way to communicate with the public rather than any other way. I think the olden days, you could just call the station and that's it, but on this you can actually ask questions, and I think, once someone actually finds a meteorologist that they really like and they follow on Twitter or some social media platform, that, I think that will really build trust, and actually if they see on their Twitter feed, this is a serious situation, there's a tornado warning, they may take that warning more seriously when they know they trust that person rather than if they were just on TV and that sort of a thing. So I think social media can actually help in the warning process and keeping people safe. Sort of a different topic, but yeah.
One thing I was going to mention real quickly was that the company that me and Scotty worked for, Burke Weather Incorporated, sometimes can be perceived as that because that's where our presence is via social media and through our website, and sometimes we're perceived as some of those other guys. We try not to be. One thing I can say that we actually had happen to us today, we felt really good about. We sat down with, and his name is just John Utek. John Utek, yeah, John Utek, who is the meteorologist with emergency coordination in Blackwell, Oklahoma. I think that's right. I hope I get all my things right there. But anyway, he was going over the things that they do to be a storm-ready city, and it turns out that everything that he said are the things that we are offering right now for our county through our organization. So it made us feel really good, because we always hoped that we were making the right steps, and we felt like today, by getting that information, that we are actually making the right steps. We use Nixle alerts and something to get out, like tonight, that's why you see us keep grabbing our phones. School closings are coming in, and we're trying to tweet those out and get those text alerts out to people. So, and to be honest with you, it's a really tough market for us, because we do fall into that. A lot of people do look at it like, are those guys legit? Because I'm not going to name any names, but there are so many, especially even right here in North Carolina, have these huge hyped out forecasts that really scare people. And then here we are, right along with guys like Brad Panovich, who is constantly fighting back to those people. So yeah, just kind of a little self plug there to make a promotion that we were really happy to find out that what we were doing is a lot of the same exact steps as those storm-ready cities, and we've had some success stories with ours. We had a Burke County tornado that came through, and a lot of people said that we were the only place that got that information to them, which was true. The National Weather Service was a little behind, I think, on some of their warnings at that point, but we was already alerting people that, hey, this looks like a situation. We need to start, looking at taking precautions. So I hate to say I'm ringing my own bell, but that's just something that we were lucky enough to be a part of, and I feel like we're finally doing the right things there.
I want to go off that real quick, though, because it gets a good transition into winter versus summertime tornadoes, Dr. Myers. I know Alabama's famous for some of those wintertime outbreaks. Has there been any research in terms of how people understand a winter outbreak versus some of these typical spring or maybe fall season outbreaks?
Yeah, it's real interesting, one, to live in an environment like that. I'm from Asheville, North Carolina myself, and when I moved to Alabama and found out we had winter tornadoes, I'm just like, okay. So understanding the meteorology, first of all, of the difference between winter tornadoes and summer tornadoes is a big thing. And our TV meteorologists in this region spend a lot of time in between seasons educating the public about what's coming up and what's going to happen meteorologically to create those winter tornadoes, the November, December ones that we can get, and what can happen. And so for the last several years, the public's become more aware of it, and that's been a big thing, is to get them to understand that potential and to be more prepared and on the ready for it. And I think a lot of that came from the April 27th event, is that we realized that there was just a lot more risk communication that we needed to do with the public to educate them about the kinds of tornadoes, the types of tornadoes, when they occur, and the types of preparation they need for them.
And in terms of types of tornadoes, I mean, Alabama's famous for QLCS lines as well. Do people understand perhaps the risk associated with those, or on the flip side, do they understand that perhaps it's not as high of a risk compared to some of the big tornado outbreaks?
Yeah, they do, and I think more of that's come since April 27th, because an interesting phenomenon since April 27th is now everybody wants to know, is the next one an April 27th tornado? And so there's been a lot of education of the public about what those are, and that's really made that differentiation. What's a supercell versus the other type, and understanding that we're more likely to get the other type than the supercells, and with the supercells we're going to have a lot more, of an outlook situation and a little bit more lead time, and so there's been a lot of that. And I think our weather-aware public gets that, and the big issue is the less weather-aware, trying to educate them about that. And so seasonally, the TV Mets do a lot of work on that.
Does the fear, or the recent past events of weather in your head, do they ever go away? Is there a time frame when people stop being scared of past weather events, or stop comparing them to past weather events?
Yeah, we call it, I call it the 9/11 effect. It's about 2 years, and I call it the 9/11 effect because, after what happened on 9/11 and the terrorism, there was a lot of apprehension about, could it happen again? And the issue is, it has a lot to do with how big the event is, and then when is the next subsequent event. So you really can evaluate this off of Hurricane Katrina. Everybody kept saying, oh, we're going to have another one as big as Hurricane Katrina. So we wait and we wait and we wait, and of course, we don't have one as big, and then we go through all these seasons where we don't even have any hurricanes. And so people tend to forget over time, and they become less and less prepared. Now, with the tornadoes, like an April 27th tornado, this region had never seen anything like that. And that one has seemed to have lasted a lot longer. And so every year there's still that question. And now even with the snow, with the winter weather events here this season, it's like, is this like last January? So it'll last a couple of years, but it has a lot to do with the magnitude.
And Jennifer and Tim as well, I mean, you guys work with the public every single day. Is that something that you still see? Maybe specifically in terms of hurricanes, I should say. And I'll throw this to Tim first, since he's done a lot of maybe across the board social media and different news stories and everything. Is that something that you see, Tim?
I'm like very worried about Florida, and I think in terms of meteorology, we all know that it's been such a long time now that Florida has seen a direct hit, and I believe that it's almost a no-brainer that people have already forgotten what a hurricane can do, and that's one state that it's like, oh my gosh, when the big one hits, I think that people are going to have a lot. There's a lot of people that, of course, has moved into the state of Florida since going back 10 years now, or however long it's been, that don't even know what a landfalling hurricane in Florida is like. So there's definitely that forgetful syndrome that's out there right now, and that's the one that comes to mind. Even though we have Sandy, we can see the images that come out of New York City and Connecticut, and we see those, and New Jersey, of course, and we see those images, but I don't know, it just doesn't hit home, I guess, for all of us, But I don't know, Jennifer.
No, I agree with you, Tim. It's been, I think, since 2004 since Florida had a really crazy hurricane season, and then, I mean, that's more than 10 years now. So, I mean, people, I'm sure, have completely forgotten. And even with that said, and like you said before, with the pictures, yeah, you see the photos of Sandy, even Katrina, but it's so hard to fathom it unless you actually experience it and see it. Like when I drove through some of the tornado damage, I haven't actually driven through any kind of hurricane damage, but the tornado damage after April 27th, like I just couldn't believe it. I mean, you see the photos and, I've seen it on TV growing up and everything, but actually seeing it in person is one thing, and it really hits you. And I think just everyone has the mindset that, they don't want to leave their home, or it's not going to be that bad, it's not going to happen to me. And I think that's really hard to be like, this is it, this is that time. It takes a lot, I think, for people to take either tornado warnings seriously or to evacuate for a hurricane. And that's something, I think, communication-wise, that it's a big struggle. It's a huge struggle. So.
That's a great point that you guys make, because that was a topic out here is how we've not had a busy hurricane season per se, excluding Sandy. Down here in the southeast, they were talking about how it's not been a major hurricane for a while, and their fears are that people are not as prepared and are not willing to take one seriously when one hits, because it's going to hit. It's just a matter of time before it does. So it's a great point from South Carolina down to Florida. I mean, it's been a while since a hurricane has hit down here. And I want to try to transition to one thing, and I'd love to get everybody's take on that. As we were talking about hurricanes, you can kind of see those develop for days on out. Dr. Laura Myers, through your research, how many times does it take the public to be warned before they actually take something serious?
It takes quite a bit. Several days out, like if you're looking at a hurricane or if you're looking at an outlook on a severe weather event, first of all, are they even hearing it? We don't know exactly at what point the lead time starts, and so they may hear it and ignore it, they may not hear it, and so it takes several times, and it's really the TV meteorologist that gets their attention. The more the TV meteorologist says it, the more serious they get about it, the more often they hear about it, the alternate sources they hear it from, that's when it starts to kick in. So if you take like the period of time before April 27th, about 5 days out, each day the information got more intense. So by the time we got up to the event, most people knew about it. And so most people were prepared to take action. Businesses were closed, schools were closed. And so that really illustrated the fact that you have to do it a lot. You got to do it over and over again. You got to get more serious with it. And so, it's really all about that. And the problem is we don't have that kind of lead time with everything. And so when you have a real, fast event spin up very quickly, how many times do you have to say it, through how many modalities do you have to get it out there before the public, realizes this is serious business?
Gary England, meteorologist out here in Oklahoma, he did a presentation yesterday talking about his 40 years of coverage of tornadoes here. And he said literally people would be outside, they would hear the siren, they would go inside, watch TV, and then it would take one of their family members calling them before they actually was like, hey, there could be a potential tornado headed in my direction. So, and that's for here in the plains where tornadoes are more prominent. You take it outside of this area, I would imagine it takes at least 5-6 times before people can actually take that threat serious.
Yeah, and it does, because people don't want to change their behavior. Especially with severe weather events, tornadoes, people are like, what are the odds that it's going to hit me at my house, at my location? And there's been, so many instances where there's warnings, they're in a polygon, they don't see anything, there's no damage. And so then they're like, okay, I really got to know that threat is here. And for a lot of people, they got to see it. Or somebody that they really care about has to call them up, like you said, and say, hey, it's there. On April 27th, parents were calling their kids at the University of Alabama and saying, do you realize it is there? And they were like, oh. And, and they had heard it all, but they didn't take it seriously till a parent called and told them, hey, you need to take action. So it's really hard to shake it. And different demographics are different on that as well. Younger people, college students, less likely to take it seriously. Females are more likely to take it seriously than males. So that process is different for different demographics.
Is there anything we can do as broadcasters or as social media users and people who distribute weather information to reach some of those challenging demographics? Especially for me, working with the university students and stuff, is there something I can do to reach out to people, in the university age group?
Yeah, and it's really a matter of understanding the different populations that may be harder to reach than others. So, like if you take college students, you got to understand why they're less apt to take it seriously. One, they're young and they think they can handle anything. They're also intensely focused on something else other than weather. They're going to school, they're running their lives, and they may not be tuned in to that kind of information, or they've never experienced anything like that. That we have a lot of students at the University of Alabama that are, not used to tornadoes, and so don't even understand what they're up against. So really understanding your population and then educating them about what's going on. You'd be amazed at the work they've done with the University of Alabama students. Freshmen are prepped. They're educated at their, early educational experiences the summer before they come in about weather preparedness and where the shelters are and what they're supposed to do. And so, they're much more weather aware because of it. So it's a matter of understanding your public and getting to them.
I'm just going to jump in, and I'm probably stating the obvious, but I think we live in a very interesting time and a very, I use the word evolve. Well, I'm using the word evolve again because we're an evolving technology, evolving forms of communication. Again, I'm probably stating the obvious, but if you just go back to 1990, 1991, it was kind of a simpler time. It was radio, newspaper, and TV, and now we, of course, yes, there's the internet, and then we break it out into the phones, and then there's phones, and then there's the mobile platforms, and then there's the text messages, and so you have to reach these various there's generation gaps between where people are getting their information, and I think it's just going to take a really long time to figure out that solution of how do you get that information to so many different age groups because of how vast our technology has changed in just a short period of time.
No, I agree with Tim. It's almost, when I was working in local stations before I came to the Weather Channel, you almost needed an extra person just for social media, just for the live blogs, for posting to all the platforms and everything like that. And that's almost a necessity now. And that's, that's my job at the Weather Channel, and Tim did it at the Weather Channel too, and he knows how it is. It's so critical to reach everybody as much as possible, and that's what's so interesting is you still have people watching TV, and I think, Dr. Myers, you said that TV is still the #1 place that people get their warnings from. Is that correct? Or get their weather information? Yeah. So it's so interesting. So TV is still #1, but then you have all these other, different platforms that are coming, and and then you probably will have more down the road. So just like Tim said, it's probably going to be a while till we can reach everyone. So in a consistent way.
Jennifer, it brings me my question to you. You working with the Weather Channel, you have a more broad spectrum. You reach the entire country. Do you guys have any initiative to kind of help alert the public or try to get that message out as where local stations can kind of do local things, but everybody sees the Weather Channel as like the outlet to go to get all of their weather? What do you guys do to kind of promote that, to get everybody aware of what could be happening to them?
Well, Tim and I think, can both answer this question, so I'll talk a little, and then I'm sure Tim worked at the Weather Channel. I'm not sure for how many years, so he'll have some really good input as well. But we have a TWC breaking handle, and then we just have the main Weather Channel Twitter handle. So when there are different weather events, like just say here the winter weather event going down right now in the southeast, once things really start to get active, we'll switch to our TWC breaking handle and doing a lot of updates there, and we'll tell people on our regular handle, we'll say, go to TWC breaking if you live in the southeast for nonstop updates, so we don't fill people's streams. But we do try to spread it out everywhere. We have almost a separate group doing Facebook. We also do Google+, Instagram, basically everything you can think of. And we try to, it's hard because there are, like, local TV meteorologists, you know all the nooks and crannies and all the smaller communities, but with the Weather Channel, it's hard to reach all those individual smaller areas, but we definitely try to. And so we try to do it in different ways, and especially when there's a significant event in a smaller area, we do break it down, and we have different forecast graphics for it. Yes, we'll have like a national forecast or regional forecast, but then we do break it out with different kind of timelines for specific towns and cities like that. So it's a little bit more difficult on a national level. It's definitely doable, but we try to do it that way so everyone can get the information that they can. We also have automated warnings on our Twitter feeds as well, both TWC Breaking and the Weather Channel, so those instantly come out so people can get the warnings. But I know Tim worked in my department for a long time, and he's probably got some good insight because he was there for April 27th. So I'd be interested to hear what he has to say.
Well, I mean, you hit on all the points that I was going to hit, but I also want to go back to just the good old local on the 8th. You know, that's how we really get to the. Sorry if I'm not sure if I'm. Okay. Anyway, that's how. You know, that's local on the 8th is sort of, you know, tried and trusted platform that the Weather Channel has used from the very beginning, from a very for many years now, and it's still very useful to this very day. And you see enhancements to local on the 8th. I'm curious, you know, I'm not with the Weather Channel anymore, but I'm curious if there's ever going to be sort of this nice connection between social media and local on the 8th, and how to marry those two, so that what you see on local on the 8th, instead of not always just your forecast, but perhaps maybe even more granular stuff via social media accounts, and how to marry those two. But anyway, that's just something that popped in my head. But no, Jennifer, you hit on all the other points. It is difficult from a national perspective to get really local, hyper-local, and that's where TV meteorologists really stand out in that way, local TV meteorologists.
One final topic as we approach the 9 o'clock hour I'd like to throw around is to Dr. Myers, the thing that Scotty mentioned earlier, and Scotty, feel more than free to comment on this, but he discussed the color tables that are used at the SPC, and especially in terms of the outlooks and severe weather tables. You know, how does the public perceive those? Do they still understand the difference between slight, moderate, and high? And if not so, how can we maybe, you know, enhance their understanding?
Well, you know, there's been a lot of work done, you know, on what the right words are and what the right colors are, and you know, the system as it has been previously, emergency managers and several of the partners have gotten used to those, and so with changes in those, there's been a lot of positive affirmation of the change, but then there's been a lot of don't change the way we react to those because we know what we're doing with those. But there's still a lot of general misperception from the public. And so with any change in it, that's been an issue. But the colors have been an even more complicated part of it, because the colors that are used mean different things to different people. And so we've worked really hard to try to figure out, you know, what those complications are, why some colors appear less serious than other colors to people. You know, it's simple when you're talking about, you know, red, green, and yellow. But then even when you start talking about, you know, green and flooding, and people go, well, green is not a serious color. So we've, you know, actually looked at a lot of those issues and tried to break that down, and it's really complicated. I've worked with a lot of the WFOs as well as the Storm Prediction Center. There's differences between the WFO scales and the Storm Prediction Center scales. And so we've working at the wording to actually all the words mean the same thing, and for the public to understand the gradations between those. But it's a communications issue, and I can tell you there's a lot of communications experts that have been trying to work with that and assist with that process, and we're not there yet.
And I know one of the main things that, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was mentioned on Weather Geeks, I believe, or talking about the colors for maybe flash flood warnings and what those should be. You had some thoughts on that?
Well, not green, and that's the big thing. The National Water Center has just opened at the University of Alabama, and one of the first things they did was a flash flood summit, and that's what they looked at. Is they know that the whole warning process for flooding is in need of revision, and that's one of the big issues, is that using the color green for flooding just doesn't make any difference to people. They don't comprehend it, they don't see it, because green doesn't mean anything serious to them. And so when we start trying to break that down and try to figure out, well, what colors would really mean something, and what colors would you use, we start to run into all kinds of complications. One of the first things we ran into is, what about colorblind people? And so we're not talking about just colors, we're also talking about variation. You put dots and stripes and different textures into the schema in addition to color. And so there's a lot of factors that need to go into that, and I think flash flooding is one of our biggest problems.
Which leads me to this question. I know we talked a little bit about it off camera, and Tim and Jennifer, I'd like for you guys to jump in as well. Do you ever see the day where we will not see the text words per se, and we'll just see numerical numbers, threat level 1, threat level 2, and then even with a watch or a warning, you can say this is a level 1 flood warning, or level 2 per se. Kind of simplify it for the general public, because if you were to see these enhanced and slight enhanced, I mean, what's the difference between slight and enhanced slight? So do you guys ever see the chance that we could just go all numerical through this process?
I'll jump in real quick. I think there's definitely some benefits, as long as it doesn't end up being what happened to the Saffir-Simpson scale. There's got to be this clear-cut definition of what these values mean, because we saw now that the Saffir-Simpson scale, although now it's called the Saffir-Simpson wind scale, because they had to make that change, because we obviously that message was not putting enough emphasis on surge. It was too much on the wind, and so and so we now know what. We see what happened with Sandy and even Katrina, which was a Cat 3, but had a surge of potentially a 4 or 5. So as long as there's these clear-cut definitions of these values, I think it can be executed. It will take time, though, that's for sure.
All right. Scotty, any other questions right there? Or Jennifer, do you have something to jump in with?
Well, I was just going to say, I agree with Tim. I think right now we have just an overall communication struggle still. I think all meteorologists, social or, on camera, I mean, we struggle to get people to just, really fully understand what it means with a tornado warning or like a winter storm warning, and just get them to take action and do something. But I think creating something that everyone understands that's simplistic would be phenomenal. But like Tim said, it's just, it would take a while too. It would take a lot of education. Education, I think, is key for everything. We can't educate enough, so I think that's the number one thing, is to educate everyone so they understand all the risks of every type of weather. So.
All right. Scotty?
Yeah, I have a couple of quick questions, and then one as we kind of end out the show. My first quick question, Jennifer, we asked you this a couple of months or a couple of weeks ago, and jump in if you want to. Laura and Tim, my quick question is, do you think the public has too much access to our weather data that we can see, where they do make a lot of these self-decisions, where as if they don't leave it up to the professionals to kind of decipher the information they need to know and not know? Laura, I'll let you go first. Or Tim, either one.
Well, real quick, an interesting piece of the research that we've done is you can kind of divide the public into 3 groups. The real weather savvy, then there are those who, want to be more weather aware, but they're too busy, and then there are those who are not very weather aware. And so when you talk about the access to that data, it's probably going to be your more weather savvy people, and they're the ones that can actually interpret that. They know who their credible sources are, and they've been taught how to look at that data, and so, that's a real safe bet right there. It's the rest of them, and I don't think they pay that much attention to it. They may see the graphics that the TV Met's putting out there. They may go to the Weather Service website and see that information, but I don't think it's that big a problem, because people just aren't that tuned into it.
That's a good point on the tail end of there, is that they're probably we're meteorologists, we're a bit geeky, and we want to all of this, and we want to just devour all this type of information that we can get our hands on. But then there is a world out there that a lot of people don't pay attention too much to the weather. But there are a few bad eggs out there that like to kind of manipulate, and they know how to access the weather information, and they know how to create decent graphics, and they go on social media, and this goes back to an earlier point. I mean, they somehow then have these hundreds and maybe even hundreds of thousands of followers that start following them on Facebook or even Twitter, and they kind of, I don't know, there's sort of this manipulation of the weather and of the forecast, and they try to hype it up, and they show just the models that you want to see, and so that garners even more and more people to follow them on Facebook, and they don't, I don't know, it's just I don't like where that's going in the social media world. I wish there's somehow that somehow can be kind of, wiped away and leave leave the ones that are really genuine and true to the science, and let people keep following the ones that are really that want to kind of just give you a good handle on the forecast, tell you the impacts, and lead you to safety.
Another quick question I'd like to present to you guys. Out here, I bet Joey probably could vouch for me. We've heard it 3 or 4, maybe even 5 times. The National Weather Service here in Norman, especially for the students who are on the University of Oklahoma campus, they are no longer called thunderstorms. And the reason behind that, the campus meteorologist, Kevin, forgive me, I can't remember his last name right off the top of my head, he said thunder doesn't kill people. So what we talk about is lightning storms. We actually say lightning instead of thunderstorms. And it reminisced, and then Rick Smith got onto it and was talking a little bit about it. And then the National Weather Service Deputy Director, she also spoke on that topic again this afternoon at the luncheon about how eventually they would like to make sure that lightning is something that's covered in this, and more people see it as a lightning storm instead of a thunderstorm, because those are dangerous and could be deadly. I just like maybe you guys' take on that, of maybe taking the word thunder out and inserting lightning storm instead of thunderstorm. And whoever wants to go first can.
No, I think that's it's interesting. I've actually never heard that before, but I agree. Lightning's terrifying. It's I'm scared of lightning more than any kind of other weather phenomena there is. So, but since we've called them thunderstorms so many times, so often, I mean, that's what they're known for. Changing the wording may be difficult and cause even more confusion, because people are still going to say thunderstorms, but then they hear lightning storms, and then they're going to be like, so what's the difference? Even though, there really isn't, but they're like, so what's the meaning behind each, or the significance? And so I think that may cause more confusion, and that's a whole other thing with education. You got to make sure everyone's educated. Like if we're going to do that, let's say the National Weather Service is like, you know what, we're only going to use lightning storms from now on. They got to develop a strategy so across social media and everything that everybody knows that, okay, they're not thunderstorms, they're lightning storms, we're doing this because of this, and that sort of a thing. But that's a very interesting topic, actually. So
it's interesting, but then it goes back to the education point. You got to explain. Okay, this is why we're changing the word from thunder to lightning. The only silver lining in all of this is that if lightning does get approved, then people will start spelling the word lightning correctly instead of lightning, like I see it everywhere. Sorry, it's a pet peeve.
Yeah, I can tell you the reasoning behind why they would want to do something like that. It's getting to the idea of impacts. When you talk about thunderstorms, people don't understand the impacts of thunderstorms. Like Jennifer said, they take them less seriously. And we did a service assessment on the derecho back in 2012, and that's one of the things that came out of that is people didn't take it seriously. One, because they didn't understand that straight line winds from a severe thunderstorm can create winds that are tornadic and even hurricane level. And so that's when we first started talking about, is there a way to change the conception or the perception of a severe thunderstorm. And so people understand the impacts of lightning. And so that's what's behind it. But Jennifer is right on target. Is you're going to have to explain it, because that's what they're going to say. They're going to go, well, is there a difference between a thunderstorm and a lightning storm?
Very good information. It's just something that I found interesting. I mean, that's one of the big takeaways that I'm leaving here with is that concept. And the reason why the guy who runs our company was actually struck by lightning, and that's how our company was formed. He was a fire weather meteorologist for the Forest Service, out helping some forest rangers fight a fire, and he and a couple other guys got struck by lightning. So it's an interesting concept, and I totally see the thinking behind that, because lightning is such a deadly thing, and a lot of people unfortunately don't take that serious. I mean, I know some people do, but then some people, they don't. So very interesting outtake from that. So we'll kind of wrap up here. I know Ricky is probably getting ready to have to leave as well. Would like to get you guys maybe 2 or 3 minutes each. What should we tell our people? And there's Ari. What should we tell our followers? What should we tell our followers, or our broadcast TV meteorologists, or social media correspondents? How should we make sure that we are getting the word out correctly to our followers, so they can seek shelter safely during the storm?
Scotty, I'm not sure if I'm going to answer that straight up, what you just answered, but I know that it has got to be difficult. Again, it goes back to this, going back to social media and being a local TV meteorologist. I can't fathom how much has to be. Yes, if you're going to, of course, there's the on-air aspect of your job, but then with the dawn of social media, there are so many platforms that they have to take care of now, and they're generally just doing it by themselves. Oh man, I don't know how they do it these days. You got the Facebook, you got Twitter, you have YouTube if you want to go on video and try to do a briefing to your audience, kind of a tease leading up to your on-air appearance on your local news. It's just amazing. I know I'm not answering your question straight up, Scotty, but it's not an easy time right now. I don't think. I have to assume.
I agree with you. Rick Smith said they actually pull in 2 additional meteorologists when they have severe weather days out here, just to cover social media aspects of what's going on out here in the Oklahoma City area. So I totally agree. It's a very difficult balance to keep there, to doing your job but also alerting all the other outlets that you have to take care of.
I think when it comes, like Tim said it perfectly, I mean, it can be nuts trying to cover everything. At my last station, I was the 4th meteorologist, and we were lucky to have 4 meteorologists. So my job during like active weather, I was either in the storm chasing vehicle or I was doing the live blog and social media and everything, and that was solely my job. Like, you needed one person definitely designated to do that. But some tips for people that are with social media and everything like that is maybe consistency. That people know they can come to that platform, like to Twitter or Facebook, at a certain time, or, to get an update or something like that. And it's okay not to, especially when you're in local TV and you're just doing it by yourself, it's okay to not update things nonstop. You can, give a forecast across all of them, and then say, but follow my Twitter feed for breaking updates. That's, a good spot, to follow me for everything, because I'm, it's hard to update them all. But doing something like that maybe is a good strategy, but it's crazy. It's hard. I mean, the need for social meteorologists, I think, is really increasing in local TV and kind of everywhere else.
Dr. Laura Myers?
Yeah, I would add to that, when you get down to an active weather event and you're trying to use social media, you're not going to have a lot of time, a lot of space to get that information out there. And so it's what you push out in social media in between your active weather events that makes it easier. So, for example, if you're coming up on a winter weather issue, in advance of that, you can define, advisories, warnings, and watches in a winter weather event in your social media. And then when you push it out there during the actual event, they're going to have a better understanding of it. So my advice would be to use both your risk communication and your crisis communication opportunities to make it easier during an active weather event.
All right, just a couple things. I know Ricky's got to go, and I want to give you Mike one last minute there to wrap up on his thing. Just want to say a couple of things to make sure it's in the recorded podcast. Want to make sure we thank the Tornado Summit for letting us come out here, learning a lot of good stuff. Got to thank the Renaissance Marriott at the Cox Hotel for giving us free Wi-Fi to use to run our show tonight. So credit to those guys for that. I got to thank. I want to make sure I thank Jennifer Watson for coming on, who was a way better guest than Jennifer Lawrence ever could have been. That Scotty had to slip of the tongue last week and said Jennifer Lawrence was coming. So for the record, we like Jennifer Watson better.
Yeah, unfortunately, I let my celebrity crush slip there. So Jennifer, I apologize. I said Jennifer Lawrence last week when I was teasing the show instead of Jennifer Watson. So I apologize. I'm so sorry.
I don't think we knew who was going to talk there, but
I thought Jennifer was about to say something. I was going to let her speak.
She's still put her in the same category, I guess. All right.
Are you done? All right, I think Joey's just froze up over here. So we're done here from Oklahoma City. We are going to go get some dinner and enjoy our last night. We're traveling to Joplin, Missouri tomorrow to check out the tornado damage there, and then we're going to be heading back home to North Carolina. So yeah.
Safe travels.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.